Just off the Texas coast sits a unique beach town marked with salty vibes and sun-soaked memories. Port Aransas is a place where family traditions unfold naturally, and beauty lies both in island views and the unhurried moments between adventures. One visit, and you'll see why generations of Texans have anchored their traditions to the island life. Start your new favorite family tradition in Port Aransas, Texas. Go to visitportaransas.com and plan your visit to Austin's beach. Today on CityCast Austin, the Austin Animal Center has long been subject to criticism and growing concerns from city leadership. Last month, City Council approved a 5-year strategic plan to turn the center around. But is it too late for that? And will the plan actually get implemented? It's Monday, April 14th. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here today with Luz Moreno-Lozano, Austin City Hall reporter for KUT. Hi, Luz, how are you?
Hi, Nikki. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being here. So today we are going to have a little chat about the Austin Animal Center. It's so funny because I used to work at City Hall, and this consistent thing that people would write in about throughout my entirety there was the Austin Animals, trying to save animals, trying to save dogs, talking about the Austin Animal Center. So it is like a buzzy topic that constituents are always talking about. Last month, City Council approved a 5-year strategic plan for the Animal Services offices, which oversees the Austin Animal Center. So can you remind us a little bit, like, what led to this plan? How did we get here?
Yeah, so for years, at least the last several that I've been covering, the Austin Animal Center has just been struggling with chronic capacity issues and staffing issues that has led to things like dogs not being properly cared for. There was an audit, I believe, in 2023 that kind of pointed to some other issues with poor conditions of the shelter, dirty kennels, things like dogs are being kept in kennels that were too small for them for their size. There were also a lot of issues with communication and transparency. And so, it's taken some time since that audit for the city to kind of figure out how do we address these issues and how can we, I guess, find a way to solve the issues long term, right? I think there was a lot of discussion on if we increase adoptions, if we increase fosters, if we increase space, like there was a lot of discussion and like tug and pull of like, how do we address the capacity issues? And I think the city council has figured out that this is kind of a long-term thing. It's a marathon and not a sprint. And so this 5-year plan kind of lays out some of the different things that they will do to kind of address some of these concerns.
Nice. And I saw that, like, coming out of the pandemic, the AAC dealt with lots and lots of overcrowding. Is that where all of the problems started, or was it happening before the pandemic?
No, this is probably a problem that dates back to probably not long after the city council decided that they wanted to be a no-kill shelter, which took place in 2011. Having this no-kill status is more than just we're going to strive to save 90% of dogs and making sure that they're leaving the shelter alive. It's kind of a work in progress. It's not just a one-time thing. But I found articles from KUT that were pointing to capacity issues in like 2015.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
my
this
gosh.
is
okay. We're talking about 10 years.
Yeah. This is an issue that goes back quite a while. And there's a lot that goes into, what is no-kill. I don't think it's really clear what that term no-kill means. It doesn't mean that we're not killing animals, that we're not euthanizing them. It basically means that we're ensuring and meeting a goal of 90% or more of animals leaving the shelter alive. And that can mean like they're being transferred to other rescues, they're being adopted, they're being fostered. So it doesn't mean that euthanization isn't happening. It just means that the city in this particular shelter is doing its best to ensure that almost all of its animals have a place to go after it leaves the shelter.
So, you actually are bringing up a great point. So for anyone that's listening that may not know, for a while, Austin was the largest no-kill city in the U.S. After it became a no-kill sanctuary in 2011. And so I understand that no-kill doesn't mean 100%. Right? Like, I get it. And 90% is a really good number to strive for. But I'm sure there's someone asking, why not 100%?
No, that's a good question. I think it's important to point out that Austin has exceeded that 90% goal. Usually they're around like 94, 95%. So they're pretty high in where they send animals after they leave the shelter. But the other 5%, it's kind of a range of dogs that might be really aggressive or dangerous, whether it's to the community, to themselves. Some dogs are really sick and have to be euthanized that way. They come to the shelter already that way, and the shelter has to make a decision like, do we try and do the best we can to save this dog, or do we put it down and make sure that it's not suffering for a long period of time? There's also dogs that come in injured and might have like been hit by a car, might have been suffered abuse, and those are sometimes lead to some like medical issues as well. And so the other 5% is just those dogs who just unfortunately have a really strong case for not making it out.
Do you think any city really do no kill 100%? Like it doesn't seem like that is a realistic goal. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of shelters across Texas that still aim to be this like no-kill status. But it's important to note that this no-kill status, or this way that we achieve it, isn't consistent across how shelters report it. And this national standard, or this like agreed upon 90%, like it's not something that each shelter tracks the same. So some shelters think that humane euthanization, so like, for example, like if a dog comes in, is hit by a car and they have to put it down, they don't count that toward their 5% or 10% of dogs being euthanized, because they see it as like they were going to have to put it down anyway.
Okay. Some
shelters also do the same thing for like sick animals. Like if they take a sick animal in and they realize like there's nothing they can do for it and they put it down, it's the same thing. They sometimes don't count that toward their euthanization goal.
Okay.
Sometimes the shelters specifically base it on like, if this dog is aggressive or dangerous to the community or to itself, then that counts toward the dogs and the percentages of dogs that they're euthanizing. And so that it's hard to say, like, does anyone really do no kill? There are thousands of shelters across the United States that still claim this no kill status. I think that how that's measured is really what's inconsistent. And it's hard to say if one shelter is doing better than the other. And sometimes like shelters also have some resources are better for, bigger shelters like Austin and San Antonio than it is for a small shelter that might be in a place like Lubbock or some of these other small cities across the state.
So you bringing the nuance into it. I didn't even think about that. So that's a really good kind of not loophole. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but it's just like, we're only going to count euthanization of like healthy animals.
Right.
Okay.
Or I think the word that they use sometimes is animals that are adoptable is what they count. Yeah. Okay. Right. So you can't adopt out a really aggressive or really sick animal. And so that shouldn't count toward their like 10% or whatever it is on their euthanization.
Okay, that makes sense. So, let's go back to the audit. So that 2023 audit found that the animal center couldn't maintain good living conditions and maintain that 95% save rate. So like, what is the current state of AAC?
They are over capacity at this point, particularly for medium to large dogs. That seems to be where they struggle consistently. Out of the years that I've covered the shelter, it's almost always large to medium dogs. They only have so many kennels that they can put these really large dogs in. And sometimes if the dog can stand it, they'll put 2 or 3 in a kennel. Okay. Yeah. And sometimes like the dog has to be by itself, and then they have to have their own kennel, and that takes up space. So they are at, what did they call it? I think critical capacity is what they call it, meaning that intake and their ability to take in dogs that are stray or lost is restricted. They're only taking it on it has to be an emergency kind of situation. And I talked with the PIO, and she basically explained to me, it's a case by case basis, and they try to take in as many dogs as they can, but there's only so much space that they have, which is also part of this problem that the shelter has with, we want to be no kill, but there's only so much space we have. And so how do we strike a balance between that 90 to 95% of dogs leaving the shelter alive and dealing with the limited amount of space that we have to house these dogs, and cats too. Cats are, especially, we're on the prime time of kitten season. And so it's about to get real busy up in the shelter.
Hey y'all, it's Nikki. I wanted to tell you about something you need to save the date for. Austin Community Foundation has been a trusted partner in local philanthropy for individuals, families, and businesses looking to do good in Central Texas. And on April 29th, Austin Community Foundation invites you to Austin in Common at ACL Live Moody Theater. Now, this is an event like no other, and it's focused on storytelling. The night will feature 4 community leaders, Carrie Rodriguez, Kendall Antonelli, Chris Hyams, and Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett, who will share their Austin stories, their diverse experiences of living, working, and raising families right here in Austin. It's a chance to celebrate our togetherness, because no matter who you are or where you're from, we all have Austin in common. Sponsorships and tickets are available at austinincommon.org. So get yours today. That's austinincommon.org. Hey y'all, it's Nikki. I have to tell you about Tecovas boots. I finally have a pair, and I don't know if y'all know this, but they're handmade, high quality, and stylish. And they're comfortable right outside of the box. Now, I know we buy everything online these days, but trust me, you have to get fitted for some boots at Tecovas. Now, whether you're like me, a newbie to boots, or you have a closet full of them, the folks at Tecovas will help you find your next favorite pair. So, grab a friend, head on over to the Tecovas flagship on South Congress or their store at the Domain. Plus, good news, they just opened a store in Georgetown at 709 Main Street for those of you that live just a little further north. With 3 locations in town, you have no excuses. So, that's tecovas.com, TECOVAS.com. Don't go gently, y'all. Just off the Texas coast sits a unique beach town marked with salty vibes and sun-soaked memories. Port Aransas is a place where family traditions unfold naturally, and beauty lies both in island views and the unhurried moments between adventures. It's a place where multiple generations can get together under one roof to share slow beachfront mornings and cool Gulf breeze evenings. An island escape with 18 miles of shoreline to cast your line, kayak with the kids, or simply cruise the coast in a golf cart. One visit, and you'll see why generations of Texans have anchored their traditions to the island life. Start your new favorite family tradition in Port Aransas, Texas. Go to visitportaransas.com and plan your visit to Austin's beach. So it's so funny because I literally last night we were having dinner somewhere and there were like 2 or 3 dogs on the patio. And, everyone's petting all the dogs and the dogs are, playing with each other. Austin is a dog city. You cannot go anywhere without seeing someone and their dog. And also, Austin is a really expensive city to live in with a dog, especially if you're renting. there's this dichotomy of like, clearly people in the city love dogs. Most of the businesses, restaurants, you can have dogs for until a certain time. Like the city is really, really, really open and loving towards dogs. But like at the same time, a lot of people can't afford to have an animal. And so I'm wondering, in this strategic plan, are they talking about like any kind of like special programs to help people adopt these dogs, to, or any kind of stipends or like something to help you get started if you adopt a dog? Because that feels like a really perfect place to start. Like, we need these dogs adopted, and if you adopt, this is what we can offer you. What are some of the goals and like, incentives outlined in this plan?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because you're right. I think you can go anywhere in Austin and there is almost always a dog hanging out.
Always. Love it.
Yeah. And it is, I've learned over the years that it has gotten very difficult, especially for renters, to have dogs, especially when there's restrictions for weight or breed, depending on like the landlord and the apartment complex. Some people also have this notion of like, if I have a big dog, I can't live in an apartment. And, that's just not true either. There's ways to kind of balance that. But yes, so the plan does have, the Austin Animal Center already has kind of programs in place that offers, like, for example, like low cost vet care, things like spay and neutering services that are at a low cost or that are subsidized. They offer microchipping clinics as well that are on like a low cost subsidized, like sliding scale kind of thing. And fostering is one of the big ways that they encourage people to be, to kind of it gives them a chance to try out if a dog would work for them. And through the foster program, I think they set you up with everything. The PIO was telling me that the shelter provides food. They provide a bed. They provide medical care. They come neutered and spayed and vaccinated. And those kinds of things are something that people can kind of start out with, right? You're not sure if you want a dog, if it'll work for your lifestyle. This is a good way to kind of try it out and get that dog out of the shelter, which makes room for another dog to come in, depending on what the season is. But they do try to offer waived adoption fees. That's like another barrier for a lot of families, is having to pay that cost of adoption. And sometimes that helps it become a little more achievable for families who might want a dog. I was learning from the center that since 2020, as we've talked about, a lot of families can't afford to like care for a pet at the same rate that they have been in the past. And a lot of it has to do with things like not being able to afford food or vet care. And the shelter does offer food, like a food distribution. Like if you call the shelter and say, hey, I really am having issues affording to feed my dog, the shelter will provide food for you. They're going to do what they can to make sure that dog stays in home with you rather than bringing them to the shelter and, exacerbating the problem. The thing that they do with strays too that can be really costly is sometimes like dogs, like I have a very mischievous one, and if he can get out of the fence, that is like his goal. At least it used to be when he was a puppy. And so the shelter offers a fencing program where if families are having issues with their dog getting out, they will help that family pay to fix their fence.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They're like, we are willing to help, and we can't help unless people tell us what they need help with. And we want to do everything we can to ensure that pet stays with their family at home and doesn't end up at the shelter. If that means we're giving them food, if it means we're helping with vaccines, if it means we're helping like patch a fence, like the shelter has options and programs that help with that.
Okay, that's dope. That's really awesome. That's awesome. I love that. I had no idea. Like that's kind of a game changer. Just little bitty things like that can be the difference between how long you get to keep your animal, or if you can keep your animal, especially the food part.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think the other thing that they do that I've heard a lot from constituents over the years is training. And some of these dogs that you like adopt from the shelter, for example, might not be as well behaved. And as anyone who's had a puppy before knows, it can be really hard to train. And it can be, it can be kind of overwhelming, especially with a new puppy when you're training them to like eat out of a bowl, walk on a leash, potty training
Potty
them.
training.
Yes, it can be a lot, especially when they're teething. Like William, this is my dog. When he was a puppy, he used to chew on everything. Like it was like he would destroy so many things. It would make me so mad.
My dog destroyed so many pieces of clothing and socks and shoes, everything. Yeah.
Oh yes. And so the shelter does also offer training programs that can help some of these families who might be having issues like behavioral issues with their dog. They also offer those as well.
I did not know that. So some of the goals outlined in this 5-year strategic plan, I was looking over it and it looks pretty great. I know that you reported on it. What are some of the goals that you outlined?
So addressing capacity is a big one. How can we increase fostering? How can we increase adoptions? How can we create more space as well? There has been discussion about adding more space onto the campus they already have, which it sounds like the animal center is hoping that they can get on the 2026 bond for that. Of course, that's going to take voter approval.
Yeah.
But addressing capacity is a big one. The other one is expanding some of these programs that I just mentioned to you that people don't even know exist. And then one of the big ones was improving their partnerships with some of these nonprofits that they work with. One of the big things that the Animal Center does is transfer dogs to other rescues. And Austin Pets Alive is the largest partner that they work with.
Wow. Okay.
There has been a lot of strain in those relationships over the years. I talked with a few partners this week who basically were like, the shelter basically calls us and is like, we're in crisis and we need you to take 20 dogs like all at once. And,
oh my God.
And the Austin Pets Alive and even the Austin Humane Society are like, well, we only have so much space to take in the dogs that we already have, and we're doing the best we can. And so there was a lot of strained relationships with that. And so the plan calls for kind of improving these relationships, which I've heard already is underway. Like they need them.
They need it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was a really big one. And the other one is improving the adoption and foster process. I've heard that it can be kind of complicated. And I think the shelter has done a lot of work over the last year or so in helping to streamline some of those things that were making it difficult, and increasing the awareness of some of the animals that are available. Some of the, they were talking about, how can we better, build, it's almost like a Facebook page for a dog. How can we, really promote this one dog?
Like a dating profile.
Yeah, exactly. How can this one dog who's been here for over a year, how can we make her more adoptable or more, susceptible to adoption? And those kinds of things are some of the things that they're working on. And I guess the last one is volunteers and staffing. That has been a really big concern. It's been a big challenge for the shelter. How can we retain and recruit more people to help us do this? And I think the shelter has 120 staff, a little more than that. But that's just not enough to run an entire shelter. They really rely on their volunteers. And there's almost 1,000 volunteers that the shelter works with. And that ranges between maybe they're giving a couple of hours a week to full-time volunteers, 40 hours a week kind of thing.
Oh my God.
So they, the city only has so much money that they can give toward the shelter. And they, the shelter has a decent sized budget, but it's not a large budget. I think last year they got 2.5 people more added to their actual full-time, part-time payroll. But I mean, I think there's more room.
There needs to be more. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw that also they were looking at improving mental and physical care. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I love that because I think that sometimes we don't think about how empathic or how animals have their own personalities and they need to be kept happy and how it affects their behavior. So I love that too.
Yeah. Behavior or dogs who are well behaved and have basic skills like walking on a leash or eating out of a bowl or even potty trained dogs are more likely to get adopted. And so that is a really big part of what they're doing because some of these dogs, especially when they've been in the shelter for a long time, they've had these behavioral issues because they're just sitting in kennels for long periods of time. Imagine if you were caged all day,
I
you
mean,
know?
listen, I could barely stay at a desk all day. I get it.
Exactly. And so, with this like behavioral program that they already offer and these staff members that work with them, they're really putting a lot of emphasis on how can we better train and better care for our animals so that, people can take them home and love them and make them part of their families.
And this is all part of like this 5-year strategic plan. And I love that they're giving themselves like good ample amounts of time to figure this out and come up with like robust lasting solutions.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point out, like, it is a 5-year plan. They don't have an implementation plan yet. There isn't like a timeline that says, by the next year, we're going to have all of these particular goals done. And then the next year, we're going to do these. It sounds like it's going to be an ongoing process. And some of the things are already kind of underway, like communication and transparency were a really big complaint from constituents. And that those kinds of changes are already kind of happening. But some of the other things like money for these programs for spay and neuter, behavioral services, like that's going to take time because the city council has to approve more money for those programs and more staffing. But it sounds like we'll get an idea of where we are regularly. The city council had asked the animal shelter to give them like at least once a year updates, but more if encouraged as we kind of go through the process.
This is really exciting. I'm biased, right? I'm biased. So as a dog owner, sometimes when I worked there, I was like, we're not taking this seriously. Like I felt like it wasn't getting the attention that it needed. So this is really good to hear.
Yes.
So Don Bland has been the Chief Animal Services Officer since 2019, but he announced he's retiring effective May 9th. But not only that, he was placed on some sort of administrative leave last month. Do we know why?
We don't know why. The city has not said why he was on leave. But I think after we've kind of heard a little about his time with the shelter, the shelter has faced years of these issues with capacity and staffing and this concern of transparency and communication. And he led the shelter for a majority of those years that this was happening. The Animal Advisory Commission in 2022 took a vote of no confidence in his leadership. And then that 2023 audit, which was kind of prompted by all of this, kind of pointed out that the shelter was really struggling. So when I heard that he was put on administrative leave, I wasn't entirely surprised. I'm like, this might have been like a long time coming.
Yeah.
And I think, as he's kind of thinking about what his future looks like, it might be time that he's like, okay, maybe I've put enough time into this and it's time to retire. But yeah, we don't have a clear picture on like why he was put on administrative leave, but I don't think it was a coincidence that this is happening as they're like adopting a new 5-year plan with a new like vision for what the future of the animal center looks like.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with him retiring, Deputy Chief Animal Services Officer Jason Garza is now acting in Bland's place until further notice. Does City Council have any reservations about Garza? Do we know anything about Garza?
So I didn't hear any immediate, reservations, concerns, anything like that about how Jason Garza will be acting in his place. When I have done stories in the past, Jason Garza was actually the person who took me through a tour last year. And I do think that he has been at the shelter long enough that they think that he can kind of transition smoothly into kind of what he's doing. I did try to talk with him, but the PIO said that he wasn't available for comment yet. It sounds like he's trying to figure out what his role will be. And it's kind of a lot going on.
Yeah.
I do think, the Austin Animal Center has been just challenged with all of these things. And I think new leadership was something that the community wanted to see. So I think, the city's trying something out and it's until further notice. And if he decides he doesn't want the job, the city can always hire someone else.
I really like that they're giving him the opportunity, especially since he's already been there and he already knows the AAC intimately. I love that this is like, okay, let's just see. And also I think it might serve to, I think when you have a changing of the guard, in that way, it helps also shine light on maybe things that we haven't seen.
People are encouraged by the changes that they've seen. I've gotten several emails since this story published that people are happy to see some change. I think that the people, it's hard to find people who don't care about animals. It's probably one of the one things that we might all have in common.
Yes.
So to see such a drastic change, even if it's taken this long, like it's been kind of a long journey, and how do we help address the concerns of the animal center and ensure that the animals are getting the proper care? I do think people in general are like, okay, there is a clear path forward, and now we have to figure out how to get there. And if that means that we're taking new leadership into place, then let's try it.
They're doing something finally.
Mm-hmm.
So what will you be watching for next regarding the center and the plan? What are you keeping your eye out for?
I will be keeping an eye on if they end up asking for money in the bond. If they decide that they want to build more space, what that's going to look like, how much money that's going to cost, what voters are going to think about that. There's a lot of people who care about animals. So it could be really easy to, convince voters that a tax rate increase specifically to expand and care for animals is an easy choice. I'll also be looking out for how they're addressing some of these capacity issues that they've had. They've talked about increasing adoptions and fosters and helping transfer dogs out. And I guess I'll also be looking at, as the budget kind of plays out, what kind of staffing and program money that they're going to get. The Mayor Kirk Watson had said previously, at least last year, that he was committed to, addressing the concerns of the Austin Animal Center, but it takes money, and the city is already dealing with a really tight budget. There isn't a lot of room for new stuff. So I'll be looking at how that plays out in the budget and what that could look like. I think it's going to be interesting to see if they add in more staff or increase funding for some of these programs, especially if they're so committed to addressing the concerns over the next 5 years.
It's cheesy, but you put your money where your mouth is. They keep having these meetings and talking about what they need, and then comes time for budget and they're not seeing the kind of help that they need or that they're being promised. So it'll be interesting to see if the same thing happens this year or if they really, really follow through, since now we have this whole plan and all these things. Yeah.
I think it'll also be on the community. There's been a lot of discussion because the budget is so tight of whether or not they're going to have to ask voters to increase the tax rate. And increasing the tax rate, while it will be costly for homeowners and people who live here, it will help fund some of these things like the Austin Animal Center or some of these other programs that help benefit people in the community that might not get the same funding because we just don't have the tax base to do it. Especially with the bond too, it's the same thing. It'll be up to the community on how much do we care about this as a community and how can we ensure and help the city accomplish its goal.
Listen, Austin, we love our dogs, so it might be time for us to put our money where our mouth is too. I'm down. That's just because I have a dog. So,
but cats too. Cat lovers are welcome to vote.
Yes, I'm allergic to cats, so I forget. But yes, cat lovers too. Animals, period. I just, I wanted to come back around to talking about fostering. I just, if anybody is listening and you're just kind of on the fence about whether or not you should get an animal, fostering is just a really good dipping your toe in the pool of having a pet. It really, really is. Fostering is a really good, just can I handle this with my lifestyle, with my money? Can I do this?
It's also a really good way to fall in love with a pet. Anyone who's owned a pet knows how quickly it can be to fall in love with this cute little four-legged thing that's just looking up at you. And is literally dependent on you for food and water and a walk.
Listen, Luz, I fell in love with some random dog on the internet yesterday. Everybody had to talk me down from the ledge. They had found this cute little dog somewhere, and someone was fostering it and couldn't do it anymore. And I was like, I need another dog, right? I need another dog. Everybody in my life was like, no. You did. You don't need, I had to be talked off the ledge. So yeah, it is that easy.
I'm here to support this decision. Get you a dog, girl.
He was so cute. I can't. But even just over the internet, I'm telling you, I got my dog because I was I wanted something to care for. I knew I didn't want children. So I was like, I want something to like give a shit about that's more than just myself, for lack of a better way to say it. And it's changed my life. It's made my life better. So I'm not saying that everybody should go out and buy an animal, but I am saying maybe you should.
There's a lot of perks to having a 4-legged creature that just loves you unconditionally. I can have the longest day at work and there are like 2 dogs staring at me with wagging tails, and it makes my day instantly better. So
exactly,
and the Austin Animal Center is full of these kinds of dogs who just want to be loved. Some of them are, they might have like gotten out of their fence and some families don't think to go look for their dog at the shelter. But they're there and, they're someone's pet at one point, and now they're looking for someone else to give them a second chance.
That's awesome. So is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't talk about, or any advice you want to give people that are listening that maybe want to get involved?
Yeah. So the Austin Animal Center has a lot of opportunities for the community to help. There's donations you can give to the shelter. They also have like an Amazon wish list. And, I think as we've been talking about there, it's really easy to maybe want of like a bred dog, like a purebred dog, like some of these doodles that are happening, golden retrievers, like German shepherds, some of these like beautiful breed, like full breed dogs. But there are lots of like animals at the shelter who need a home. And there's one thing that I've learned from the Austin Animal Center over the years of covering them is they're like, adopt from the shelter before you go to one of these like breeders,
Yes. And also, not for nothing, I'm not trying to shame anybody.
Oh,
that's not what's happening. But 2 days ago, there was a story about how in Bastrop they had broken up this breeding ring, and there were like 30 dogs.
Right.
That now has to go to the shelter because they've been like living in bad conditions so that they can be bred, and so like. Right. Again, not shaming anybody, but there's consequences for that kind of, and this is coming from someone who needs a hypoallergenic dog. Like, I am allergic to dogs. I just got lucky that one showed up at Austin Pets Alive and I grabbed her. You know what I mean? Like, so it happens. If you are like me, it happens. You can find a hypoallergenic dog. Yeah,
it does. Yeah, I have a golden retriever myself, but I also have my shelter dog as well. And I love them both, of course. Right. But that's like the one thing the Austin Animal Center always pushes. Anytime I talk with them about anything happening at the shelter, they're like, encourage people to adopt from the shelter before you go to a breeder. Because there's lots of dogs who just want a home and they're just sitting there waiting to be adopted. And there's nothing you can do. If there's anything you can do for your community, adopting a dog from the shelter or a cat, for that matter, could go a long way.
Okay, y'all heard it here. Luz, thank you so much for being here and chatting with me about this. This has been great. I'm so glad that you told me about all of these programs, because I did not, the helping with the food and the fence, like that's a really big deal. So thank you for being here and talking about that.
Yeah, I think if you go to the Austin Animal Center website, there's a tab that says resources on there, and it'll kind of point you to some of these programs. I think if you just call the Animal Center, like if you don't have access to the internet, find its phone number, they will help you. Like there is help there. So yeah, definitely take advantage of it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to check back in with you, I'm sure, in the future.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find links to Luz's work in our show notes. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.